Welcome, sleepless spirit. I'm your storyteller tonight, here to guide you gently into the shadows of slumber, where dreams take over and worries fade away. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more bedtime tales, whispered just for you. Let me know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it as you listen tonight? And if there's a story you've been longing to hear, something spooky, something comforting, tell me. I'm always listening. Now, tuck yourself in. Let the darkness wrap around you like a warm blanket. It's time to let go and drift into the story. He began to doubt all he believed to be true about Walmart customers. For almost 2 years, Carter had been working the nightly security shift, and he took great satisfaction in being familiar with every nook and cranny, as well as every common noise in the enormous store, with everything from a full supermarket area to an auto store. The Baton Rouge facility was one of Louisiana's bigger mega centers. Carter had also witnessed his fair share of oddities on his nightly rounds. There were the uncommon medical crises, the homeless people seeking refuge from Louisiana's fickle weather, and the occasional shoplifter attempting to conceal goods. However, nothing had prepared him for what he would discover that chilly March evening in the home goods area, around 2:47 a.m. The first indication that anything was amiss appeared, based on the surveillance logs that the local police and store management would subsequently analyze. Several things in the bedding section to have been disturbed while Carter was performing his routine perimeter check. They took comforters off the shelves. The floor was littered with pillows, and behind a rack of cheap winter blankets, what seemed like improvised bedding had been set up in the corner. Carter initially thought it was just bad restocking from the night shift, but as he got closer to look, he heard something that chilled him to the bone. The sound of rhythmic, steady breathing emanating from inside the pillow and blanket fort. Carter quickly grabbed his radio to call Sarah Chen, the nighttime manager, who was processing inventory reports in the back office. But before he could say anything, a voice came from the bedding heap. A remarkably conversational and soothing voice. According to the voice, I was wondering when someone would finally find me, and slowly, from what Carter would later characterize as an elaborate nest constructed completely of Walmart items, a middle-aged man came out. The man, who had graying hair and what seemed like several layers of clothes, all of which still had Walmart price tags on them, looked to be in his 40s. Perhaps the most bizarre conversation Carter has ever had while in security was what came next. The individual, who only went by David, said that he had spent the last 3 days residing in the store. He stressed that he was living there, not hiding. He claimed to have developed a regimen in which he moved between the store's various departments, based on the time of day and the staff schedules, which he had reportedly committed to memory. Like any other consumer, he would peruse the aisles at the busiest shopping times. He would withdraw to less crowded areas, such as the garden center or automotive, during restocking times. And he would use items from the shelf to make sleeping arrangements in the home goods area during the night. David's approach was unsettlingly advanced, knowing that the damaged items would be written off rather than looked into. He had been eating food from the grocery department while carefully opening packages to make them look damaged rather than stolen. Early in the morning, when no employees were around, he had been utilizing the toilets for personal hygiene and even doing laundry with the showcase models in the appliance section. The most unsettling aspect was that David had been so closely observing the store's operations that he was aware of which security cameras had blind spots, which employees worked certain shifts, and even which days fresh product was delivered to particular departments. A wave of both intrigue and fear swept over Carter as he heard this explanation. This man effectively converted a retail establishment into his own residence, and he did it so expertly that no one noticed. In one of the area's busiest stores for 3 straight days, David clarified that he had lost his apartment 2 weeks earlier as a result of losing his job, and instead of turning to family or social services for support. He had chosen to try to live covertly in a big box store. He discussed it in the dispassionate manner of a researcher reporting on results from a lab. After over 20 minutes of the talk, Carter finally called management, and then the local police. David took Carter on a tour of his temporary residence during that period, highlighting the different adjustments he had made to make it more comfortable. Using the display models from the electronics department, he had devised a method for charging his phone. To detect approaching footsteps, he had determined which parts of the store had the finest acoustics. During his first several hours in the business, he had even studied the cleaning crew's timetable and used this information to determine the best times to access various places. Sarah Chen, the overnight manager, came on the scene first, then to Baton Rouge Police Department officers. David was surprisingly calm and cooperative. He didn't try to run away or fight back, and he even appeared a little pleased with his achievement. David clarified that he had no intention of permanently stealing anything as the officers took his statement. He saw what he was doing as borrowing things that he would pay for after he recovered. Everything he had eaten or used, including how many paper towels he had taken from the facilities, had been meticulously recorded in his mind. Public records eventually provided the police report. Queries turned out more unsettling information. On David's 3-day stay, he had, in fact, been moving through the store throughout business hours, frequently showing up in the picture as just another consumer perusing the aisles, according to an analysis of security footage. He had even spoken to other patrons and personnel on several occasions, giving lost customers directions and striking up a conversation with staff members. Nobody had guessed that this kind, articulate man was actually residing in the shop. David's explanation of why he expressly selected Walmart for his experiment was possibly the most disturbing. In order to have a better understanding of the daily routine, he had called the store several times to inquire about services and operation hours, examined the store's layout online, and observed consumer traffic patterns by visiting at various times of the day. He had selected the Baton Rouge site due to its size, round-the-clock operations, and the fact that it was busy enough for him to blend in without being so busy that he was always being watched. According to the study, David had been remarkably conscientious about sanitation and hygiene while he was there. He had kept himself clean by using store products, but he had done so in a way that left as little trace as possible that he was there. In the places where he spent the most time, he had been cleaning up after himself and properly disposing of rubbish. He had claimed the area as his temporary home, and in many respects, he had been a model resident. Since the majority of the items David had consumed were damaged and would have been written off anyhow, the allegations of theft were very small. Nevertheless, David was finally charged with criminal trespass and theft. He showed what seemed to be sincere regret for his acts and cooperated during the court proceedings. However, David's constant claims that his 3-day experiment had been successful and that he had demonstrated that it was feasible both troubled Carter and the responding officers. Significant adjustments were made to the store's evening security protocols as a result of the occurrence. David identified blind areas, and more security cameras were placed there. New procedures for performing more frequent and comprehensive nightly checks of every department were devised, along with an increase in overnight manpower. After initially taking delight in learning about the exceptional circumstance, Carter later acknowledged that the episode had made him uneasy about the weaknesses in retail security and the extent desperate people would go to in order to survive. According to Carter's subsequent comments with local media, the most unsettling part of the whole story was how normal and logical David had appeared throughout the entire encounter, rather than the fact that he had managed to live in the business without being seen. This was neither illogical action out of desperation or the behavior of someone going through a mental health crisis. This individual had meticulously devised and carried out a sophisticated plan to live rent-free in a retail space. Furthermore, he had done it with such sophistication that it was possible that, given the expertise he had gained, he could repeat the action, possibly even more successfully. Let's go on to the second tale. Phoenix, Arizona experiences intolerable summer temperatures. Emily Parker was also appreciative of the Walmart Supercenter on 51st Avenue's air conditioning on the evening of August 12, 2020. After a nighttime employment at a nearby medical clinic, what began as a normal grocery run would become one of the most horrific events in her life, an experience that would make her doubt her own sanity and make her fear going shopping alone in the future. Emily had always been a down-to-earth individual. She was accustomed to working with schedules, statistics, and logical events because she was a medical administrative assistant. She took great satisfaction in being perceptive and meticulous, traits that worked nicely for her in her career. However, nothing she had ever experienced had prepared her for what would happen on Thursday night at 7:30 p.m., what should have been a straightforward 30-minute shopping trip. Emily's initial observation was that, for an early August evening, the store was surprisingly quiet. The Phoenix store would often be crowded with families going shopping once a week, but tonight was different. The aisles appeared to be longer. She could not quite pinpoint the strange tone of the ambient sound, and the fluorescent lights seemed harsher. She picked up a shopping cart and started walking through the store as usual. Before going on to the dairy and frozen foods, start with the produce department. She had done it countless of times before. It was a systematic and effective technique. Emily was picking tomatoes and determining whether avocados were ripe as she moved through the produce area, when she noticed another customer in the corner of her eye. That's nothing out of the ordinary. She noticed something in this person's movement. Even though stores have other patrons, they appeared to be walking in her footsteps, pausing when she did and moving when she did. She initially wrote it off as a coincidence. It made reasonable that two shoppers might exhibit similar patterns because the produce section had a natural flow. However, Emily's sense of mirroring grew stronger as she went from the produce department to the bakery section. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw the same figure pause at precisely the same time, seemingly looking at objects on the shelf directly across from her. As she stopped to inspect a loaf of bread, the figure shifted as she reached for something on a packet of bagels to check the expiration date, their side of the dispute. It couldn't have happened by accident. The time was too exact. Although Emily knew that worrying might produce erroneous patterns where none existed, her medical background had taught her to trust her observations. To test her suspicions, she made the decision. She purposefully took a detour down the car aisle, which she seldom went on supermarket trips, rather than sticking to her usual shopping route. In a matter of seconds, she could really hear the screech of shopping cart wheels behind her. As she turned down the health and beauty aisle, her heart rate started to rise along the same trajectory. Emily used the reflecting surface of a nail care exhibit to observe behind her as she feigned to research various shampoo brands. Watching the sight chilled her blood. Standing about 20 feet behind her, a person of average height in a dark hoodie appeared to be inspecting items on the shelf as well, but they weren't actually looking at anything. They appeared to be seeing her reflection in the same screen she was using to watch them, based on the posture of their heads. The knowledge that this individual was purposefully, Emily felt a surge of panic as she mirrored her actions, in search of a store employee who could assist or at least offer the assurance of another person's presence. She hurried toward the pharmacy area. However, she found that the pharmacy was closed for the night. As she got closer to the desk, there was no staff in sight, but the automatic prescription pickup was still running. When Emily became aware of how alone she was in a public place, her panic started to worsen. The enormous scale of the store, which had before seemed practical, now seemed menacing. Normally easy to navigate, the vast aisles suddenly offered too much open space, making her feel vulnerable and exposed. since there would be more employees and customers there. She made the decision to go near the front of the store, where the checkout lanes were. Emily observed that her follower was consistently keeping the same distance as she moved toward the front of the store, near enough to keep her visible, but far enough away to prevent direct conflict. There was something uncanny about the way the person moved, as though they had been observing her shopping habits for more than just this evening. They appeared to predict her changes in direction before she did. Emily came upon another customer, an elderly man with a full cart who was obviously doing some serious grocery shopping. As she made her way to the main aisle that ran around the front of the store, experiencing a little sensation of relief at seeing another typical client, Emily slowed down, acting as though she was looking at her shopping list. She kept a close eye on her follower to see if they would carry on their routine with someone else around. She was horrified to see the cloaked figure. They changed how they behaved while the old man was around, but they continued to monitor the situation. Rather, they started perusing merchandise in the adjacent dollar store, staying in a position from which they could watch Emily while yet seeming like any other consumer to anyone else in the vicinity. Emily was more frightened by the intricacy of this shift than by the initial behavior that followed. Emily understood that she had to take serious action. She was worried about what would happen after she left the store and walked to the parking lot, and she couldn't go on shopping with this person following her around. Despite the somewhat late hour, the customer care desk was still manned, so she made the decision to approach it. Emily observed that her follower started traveling in the same direction as she did when she approached the customer service area, but on a different path that would prevent them from seeing the service desk directly. This implied a degree of preparation and knowledge that showed this wasn't a case of mistaken identity or haphazard action. She was being purposefully stalked by someone who was sophisticated enough to evade store staff detection. Emily went over to the young woman behind the counter at the customer service desk and gave her an explanation in the most composed manner possible. She asked if security could take her to her car and described the gentleman who had been pursuing her. While they waited for security to arrive, the employee, whose name tag identified her as Michelle, listened intently and promptly summoned a security guard using the store's internal communication system. Michelle conversed with Emily to keep her composed, but she also positioned herself to look at the store floor. Michelle pointed to the electronics section and asked, "Is that the person you were talking about?" After a few minutes, Emily turned to see the hooded figure standing close to the video game display, seemingly browsing but in a position that allowed her to see the customer service desk clearly. When the security officer showed up, Emily gave a thorough account of her experience and identified the individual who had been pursuing her. Emily was asked to wait at the customer service desk while Robert, the middle-aged guard, went up to the person to look into it. Emily observed Robert strolling nonchalantly in the direction of the electronic department while feigning to perform a standard security inspection. What followed was possibly the most unsettling aspect of the whole encounter. The passenger instantly left their cart and hurried to the closest exit as soon as the security guard was within speaking range of the hooded figure. Instead of running, which would have attracted attention, they moved with deliberate speed, as if they had anticipated the prospect of being confronted. Robert watched from a distance as the individual left the store and vanished into the parking lot. When he came back, he said the person was no longer there. However, not before Robert had been able to notice that the individual had been carrying nothing but a shopping cart with a single item, a box of batteries that seemed to have been chosen at random in it. The security inquiry turned up more unsettling specifics. Emily's stalker had been in the store for more than an hour before Emily arrived, according to Robert's analysis of the security camera footage. The visitor was seen by the cameras moving through several areas of the store without really making any purchases. Instead, they seemed to be examining the building's layout, sightlines, and consumer flow patterns. The most disturbing aspect of all is the security video revealed that as soon as Emily walked into the store, the hooded person stopped what they were doing and started to follow her. This implied that Emily was singled out, either because the stalker was seeking for a certain profile or because the person had been waiting for her specifically. Emily gave a thorough account of her event, and the Phoenix Police Department was notified of the occurrence. But since there had been no real criminal activity, following someone in a public location is not unlawful. The police could only take a limited amount of action, and they suggested that Emily change her shopping pattern, be mindful of her surroundings, and report any additional incidences right away. Emily was unable to go shopping by herself without being anxious 4 weeks following the incident. She started going on grocery runs with friends or family and stopped going shopping in the evenings. Altogether, her relationship with the place that had once felt predictable and safe had been profoundly altered by the encounter. She was always looking at her reflections in mirrors and store windows, looking for anyone who might be watching her. Emily later thought that the most unsettling thing about the whole encounter was how sophisticated and patient her stalker had been. This was not rash, haphazard activity. It was designed, thought out, and carried out using knowledge of human psychology, security blind spots, and retail layouts. The individual had been able to follow someone covertly, modify their behavior when the situation changed, and immediately vanish when confronted. Emily never saw her stalker again, but she was very troubled by the experience and wondered how many other consumers might be feeling the same fear she did that night without having the guts or chance to tell security about it, and how many others might be doing similarly without being seen. Let's go on to the third tale. When the globe was in the throes of pandemic panic, the spring of 2020, and toilet paper was worth more than gold, the Walmart Supercenter on Southeast Powell Boulevard in Portland, Oregon, became the improbable setting for what workers would later refer to as the 2020's Great Toilet Paper Heist. What began as a regular inventory check on a Tuesday morning would turn out to be a conspiracy so complex, so boldly conceived, and so ludicrously executed that it reads more like a black comedy than a true crime. However, there are instances when reality is more bizarre than fiction, particularly when inventiveness and desperation collide in the most surprising manner. Karen Mitchell, the store manager, has more than 15 years of retail experience, and she believed that she had witnessed everything. She had dealt with customers who tried to return obviously worn products with fake receipts, shoplifters who tried to conceal baby carriages and merchandise, and the odd person who believed they could leave with a television by just pretending to be the owner. However, with her vast knowledge of retail crime, nothing had prepared her for what she would find on the morning of April 14, 2020, when she arrived at work, to discover that all of the toilet paper in the store had disappeared overnight. Miguel Santos, an overnight stalker, first reported that the paper goods hull had changed in appearance when he arrived for his 4 a.m. change. Karen initially thought it was just a matter of high customer demand. Customers have been known to wait in line before stores open to get whatever supplies they could locate, and shortages of toilet paper had been in the news for weeks. Karen understood, however, that they were dealing with something much more unique than eager early bird shoppers. When Miguel's story became more specific, Miguel claimed that the entire paper's goods section had been thoroughly emptied, but not in the disorganized manner that would result of a feeding frenzy among customers. Instead, with near military accuracy, the shelves had been cleaned. Price tags had been painstakingly pulled off and put neatly at the end of each aisle as the products were removed in a methodical manner, working down from the top shelves. What's really stranger, the shelf units, they had been well cleaned and rearranged, as though someone had chosen to do some spring cleaning while stealing toilet paper, in anticipation of discovering proof of after-hours break-ins, or possibly a concerted effort by several shoplifters. Karen's first reaction was to view the security tape from the night before. Instead, she found video that looked more like it, belonged in a heist film than a standard security audit. For people wearing identical Walmart staff vests and name badges were caught on camera entering the store at approximately 11 p.m. through what looked to be authentic access credentials. At the staff door, the phony staff walked around the store with the self-assurance and effectiveness of those who should have been there. Massive amounts of toilet paper were moved from the storage facilities to a loading dock at the back of the building using shopping carts, hand trucks, and even a small motorized pallet jack. Their attention to detail added to the convincingness of their performance. They adhered to the correct safety procedures, even took their usual breaks in the staff break area. While wearing the necessary personal safety equipment, the group had been in the store since 11 p.m. for about 6 hours, according to the security footage, until about 5 in the morning, eliminating each and every packet of paper towels, toilet paper, and face tissues from both sales floor, as well as the storage spaces. A big truck was parked at the loading dock, and they had packed everything into it. A vehicle with the name and logo of a real paper goods wholesaler that frequently delivered goods to Walmart locations throughout the area. Karen's inquiry revealed that the intricacy of the operation went well beyond merely donning fictitious clothing and utilizing a convincing vehicle. Through some means, the criminals were able to acquire valid employee ID cards, which gave them access to the loading dock and employee entrance to the building. Additionally, they had purchased authentic Walmart inventory scanners, which they utilized to process each item they took out correctly and produce what looked like authentic transfer records in the store's computer system. According to the fictitious transfer papers, all of the toilet paper had been moved to other Walmart locations in the area as a result of inventory rebalancing regulations. The documentation was so meticulous and professional that it contained authentic-looking manager signatures, the appropriate authorization numbers, and even transportation manifests that matched the truck's purported delivery timetable. It was obvious that someone had thoroughly studied Walmart's internal processes and documentation needs. Karen's professional respect for the scheme's execution matched her growing astonishment at its audacity. In addition to stealing goods valued at thousands of dollars, the thieves' methods first gave the impression that the heist was a standard internal transfer. The robbery might have gone unnoticed 4 days if Miguel hadn't observed that the shelves appeared different, which would have allowed the thieves time to sell their stolen goods and get away. When Karen learned that the fictitious employees had actually enhanced several areas of the store's operations while engaging in illegal activity, the investigation took an even more ridiculous turn. In order to optimize space utilization and enhance consumer access, the paper goods was replenished with additional merchandise. The rearranged storage space was more effective than it had been in months. Even a price scanner that had been damaged 4 weeks had been fixed by one of the criminals. More strange information surfaced when word of the theft circulated among the store staff. Rosa Delgado, the night custodian, stated that she had come across the phony workers while doing her cleaning duties and had even given them praise for their diligence and commitment. In addition to being kind and professional, the guys had offered to assist her in moving some large machinery. Rosa had thought they were temporary employees or fresh staff brought in to meet the increased demand during the outbreak. Another level of the scheme's sophistication was exposed by the customer support desk. During their stay at the business, the fictitious staff processed multiple toilet paper returns from customers, creating fictitious receipts and return credits that further concealed their stolen actions. They had also assisted a few real customers who had visited the shop late at night, offering product recommendations and helpful instructions with the upbeat efficiency of real Walmart staff. According to Karen's inquiry, the criminals had spent weeks organizing their crime. Security footage from earlier evenings showed what now appeared to be spying activities being carried out by people who looked like actual customers. They had timed how long it took to move goods from storage regions to the truck loading zone, planned out camera placements, examined staff timetables, and watched loading dock operations. Karen's examination of the store's staff breakroom surveillance camera revealed the most daring element of the whole plan. The fictitious workers were seen in the video taking their allotted breaks, eating snacks they had brought from home, and having regular conversations about sports, current affairs, and their other occupations. On a website that reviews workplaces, one of them had even written a favorable evaluation of the store's breakroom facilities, complimenting the cozy chairs and good coffee maker. The Portland Police Department was faced with a situation that was unlike any they had ever dealt with when they arrived to conduct an investigation. Detective James Wright later acknowledged that, despite enhancing the work atmosphere and offering first-rate customer service, he had never come across criminals who had stolen anything. Several real Walmart employees were disappointed to hear that the courteous, diligent night crew would not be returning because the criminals had carried out their crime with such expertise and attention to detail. Ultimately, the inquiry showed that the plan had been planned by a group of former retail workers who were laid off as a result of the pandemic. They had planned and carried out what they saw as the ideal victimless crime-stealing goods that were in artificially high demand because of panic buying from a company they believed had treated them unfairly using their insider knowledge of retail operations. Derek, their leader and a former assistant manager, later clarified that they had attempted to conduct their heist as professionally as possible in order to lessen the damage on specific staff members and clients. The gang had been repackaging the stolen toilet paper for sale on internet markets at exorbitant pandemic rates when it was finally found in a warehouse in southeast Portland. Before being caught, the criminals had sold about 40% of their stolen stock, making enough money to pay for many months of unemployment benefits. They took pride in their so-called victimless entrepreneurship, while also expressing sincere regret for their crimes when they were detained. Many Portlanders expressed a reluctant appreciation for the group's expertise, inventiveness, and the irony that they had outperformed many regular retail personnel providing customer service during their illegal activities, making the case something of a local legend. When late-night comedy shows began to feature the ridiculous details, the story became widely known, and the criminals were transformed into odd pandemic-era folk heroes. After 15 years of traditional theft events, Karen Mitchell subsequently observed that she had learned more about retail security risks from the Great Toilet Paper Heist of 2020. In addition to physical security flaws, the criminals had taken advantage of procedural and psychological presumptions about how lawful personnel should act and how business operations ought to appear. Their triumph had rested on the brave rather than on violence or cunning. Belief that those who adhere to the correct protocols and wear the appropriate uniforms would be taken for granted, even if no one knew them. Walmart's inventory monitoring systems, after-hours security measures, and staff access policies were all significantly altered as a result of the event. Although she was aware of the significant ethical and legal issues with the criminals' chosen approach to unemployment benefits, it also left Karen with a lasting admiration for their entrepreneurial energy and meticulous attention to detail. Let's go on to the fourth tale. Since it still bothers me 3 years later, I must tell you about my last day of employment at Walmart. And it's something that radically altered my perspective on human dignity and business values. It doesn't matter what my name is. Since then, I've modified it. In any case, I will never forget what happened on November 18, 2018, in the Walmart Supercenter in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I had worked for almost 4 years. As an electronics department supervisor, I had positive performance reports, strong connections with most of my co-workers, and the sincere belief that Walmart cared about its customers and employees despite its problems. On a chilly Sunday, that belief faded, morning with a client whose name I never found out. At 6 in the morning, I'd shown up for work, an hour prior to the store's public opening in order to assist with goods displays and inventory counts. It was just another Sunday morning, with only a few workers dispersed throughout the enormous store. It was calm and deliberate, as they prepared everything for yet another day of retail mayhem. I noticed a disturbance coming from the food department. While I was in the electronics section organizing the mobile phone display and updating price tags, I initially thought it might have been a customer who had arrived early making too much noise, or someone dropping a pallet of goods. However, the sound was distinct. Human voices in despair and urgency instead compared to the normal noises of a store. As I approached the area where the commotion was coming from, I discovered a number of workers congregated at the cereal section on aisle 14. As I approached, I noticed that they were all staring at something on the ground, and I could tell right away by the look on their faces that something was really wrong. An old man lay still between the Lucky Charms and the Cheerios. Despite the pleasant Oklahoma weather, man was wearing a bulky winter coat and was most likely in his 70s. He was motionless, and I could see that he wasn't breathing even from a distance of a few feet. My initial thought was to dial 911, so I took out my phone and did just that. However, Assistant Manager Rebecca Torres showed up before I could make a call and aggressively instructed me to put my phone away. According to her, all emergency circumstances must be handled in accordance with protocol through management channels, and she would be responsible for informing the relevant authorities. Assuming that she was more familiar with the processes than I was and that assistance would arrive in a matter of minutes, I grudgingly followed her instructions. Rebecca promptly sent the employees back to their departments, giving them explicit orders not to talk to anyone, even their co-workers, about what they had witnessed. She assured us that everything was under control and advised us to carry on with our standard opening practices. I went back to electronics, but I was unable to focus on phone screens and price tags. While we pretended nothing had happened, we were aware that a dead man was lying in the cereal aisle. I went up to Rebecca to inquire about the status of emergency services after roughly 20 minutes had passed with no paramedics nor cops in sight. I was really chilled by her remark. She clarified that before dialing 911, she had spoken with the store manager, district manager, and corporate loss prevention, since we must comprehend the hazards of public exposure and liabilities before enlisting the help of other organizations. She reassured me that emergency services had been alerted, but that since the situation is no longer urgent, they were taking their time in responding. What I was hearing was unbelievable. Liability and media exposure were the management's top concerns after a person died in our store. I questioned Rebecca directly about whether the man had been dead when we discovered him, or if calling for assistance right away would have had any chance of saving him. In answer, she reminded me that I was not equipped to make medical decisions, and that the company would face legal issues if I speculated about such issues. The scene grew increasingly strange as the morning wore on and the store opened to the public. The body of the elderly guy was still in aisle 14, but it was encircled by wet floor signs and covered with a tarp to deter consumers from entering. Employees were guiding customers around the area that was blocked off while stating that there was a maintenance problem. Needed that aisle to be temporarily closed. Families with kids passed by, utterly oblivious to the fact that they were shopping within feet from a shrouded corpse, and I watched in horror. Nearly 2 hours after we found the dead, the paramedics eventually showed up, followed by police officers who appeared irritated by the wait for notification. I overheard one of the officers asking Rebecca why the finding and the emergency call had been so long apart. The cops obviously weren't buying Rebecca's explanation, which was filled with corporate jargon about following the right procedures and making sure the material was true. I found out more information regarding what had transpired throughout the investigation. It appears that the elderly guy, Charles Patterson, had a heart attack early on Sunday morning while out shopping. His body's position and the groceries that were strewn all over him suggested that he had been reaching for something on a high shelf when he fell. He had been lying in that aisle for at least half an hour before the first employee found him. according to security footage. The arrival of Mr. Patterson's daughter at the business was the most tragic moment in the narrative, when her father had not returned from his weekly food shopping excursion. She had contacted the store to ask where he was. Susan, the daughter, was upset not only by her father's passing, but also by the way things had been handled. She couldn't comprehend why customers had been permitted to continue shopping around her father's covered body, or why the store had put corporate processes ahead of his dignity. I battled my guilt over what I had seen in the days after the tragedy. I was aware that the outcome had not been altered in the end by the delay in contacting emergency personnel. When we located Mr. Patterson, he was obviously beyond our ability to assist. However, the corporate reaction's callousness, the way that liability concerns were given precedence above human dignity, and the manner in which customers had been kept hidden was deeply troubled by the darkness surrounding what was taking place among them. I made an effort to voice my concerns to other staff members, but I soon learned that management had made it plain that discussing the occurrence may lead to disciplinary action or even termination. A number of colleagues admitted that they were just as uncomfortable as I was with the way the incident had been handled, but they were too scared to voice their disapproval because they needed their employment. The corporate message was unambiguous. Defending the interests of the business came before the moral concerns of the workers. The tipping point was when Susan Patterson called me, having somehow managed to get my contact details, and demanded to know how her father was discovered and how long he had been laying there. She required employee testimony regarding the sequence of events and management's response, since she was thinking about suing Walmart. I desired to assist her, but I was also afraid of losing my job and even being sued by Walmart's legal department. I decided to give Susan a thorough account of everything I had seen for a number of restless nights, regardless of the possible repercussions for my job. I felt obligated to speak the truth about what had transpired to her father's memory and to my own conscience. Susan and her lawyer visited with me and gave a sworn declaration outlining the sequence of events, the management's goals, and how customers had been kept in the dark. The ensuing court cases were drawn out and intricate, with numerous depositions, document reviews, and attorney negotiations. Walmart's legal team made a concerted effort to discredit employee testimony regarding the incident and to reduce the company's liability. I was exposed to severe asking me questions concerning my grasp of company regulations and procedures, my relationship with management, and the reasons I came forward. I kept working at Walmart during the court proceedings, but the atmosphere grew more antagonistic. For minor offences that had previously gone unnoticed, I received a write-up. Unwanted shifts were added to my schedule, and I was shut out of meetings and training sessions that might have helped me in my career. It became evident that I was seen by management as a trader who had put outsiders ahead of the company's devotion. Walmart acknowledged no wrongdoing, but agreed to review its emergency response protocols as part of an out-of-court settlement for an undisclosed sum. Susan Patterson was paid. However, she informed me that the treatment of her father during his last hours and the hours that followed could not be compensated for with money. She claimed she would never be able to come to terms with the fact that he had passed away by himself on a chilly floor as business officials debated the ramifications of culpability. After the settlement was finalized, I was no longer permitted to work at Walmart. Even though I wasn't officially dismissed, I eventually resigned because I was constantly harassed and had my schedule manipulated. Exactly 1 month after Charles Patterson's death in Hull 14, I departed on December 15, 2018. Knowing that I would never again work in retail, I tidied up my locker, handed in my name badge, and left the store. I learned from the experience that doing the right thing can occasionally have significant personal and professional repercussions, and that business interests and human decency don't always coincide. I lost a job I had fought so hard to develop into a career, but I learned that I had made the right decision when it counted most. Even though the truth about what transpired was uncomfortable for a multi-billion-dollar organization. Charles Patterson deserved better than what he received from Walmart that day, and his daughter deserved the truth. I'm still thinking about that Sunday morning 3 years later, and I wonder how many other Charles Pattersons have perished at retail establishments as business leaders handled media exposure and assessed liability risks. By telling this experience, I wish to pay tribute to him and perhaps inspire others to put human decency ahead of corporate loyalty in similar circumstances. Let's go on to the fifth tale. The Walmart Supercenter on North Thoroughfare Road in El Paso, Texas, was the scene of a startling incident on the afternoon of April 23, 2021. Workers perplexed customers and left police detectives searching through hours of security film for solutions. A 34-year-old man who went by the name Levi was the trigger. At 2:15 p.m., he walked into the store, wearing a navy windbreaker and plain pants. He crossed the entryway and made his way directly to customer service, which was so routine that nobody gave him much attention. What transpired felt more like a live documentary on the ragged borders of reality than a retail disruption. The official incident report states that Levi didn't start off by complaining about a price check or a refund. He leaned across the counter instead and inquired if Walmart followed temporal merchandise protocols from the shocked employee. Levi emphasized that he required permission to return things that won't be created until 2087. Ana Maria Gonzalez, the clerk, said that she had never heard of such a thing. Gonzalez summoned a floor supervisor, thinking she was being played. When Sergio Delgado, the supervisor, came, Levi was calmly explaining that the closed-loop supply chain used in his time was the basis for commerce, and that returning items to 2021 was a regrettable but essential corrective measure. Although security was notified, Levi's behavior did not immediately raise any concerns. He spoke in measured tones, was well-spoken, and did not pose any threat. Instead of throwing him out, Delgado chose to watch. 16 separate cameras would record what transpired over the following 45 minutes, which investigators would subsequently stitch together like a perplexing documentary reel. Levi methodically made his way along the aisles, giving unsolicited historical background of commonplace items. In electronics, he held a demo model of an iPhone as if it were a relic from a museum, stating that carbon-based neural mesh would soon surpass its silicon architecture. A number of onlookers listened, half amused, half uneasy. Autos were Levi's next destination. He stood next to motor oil end caps and told buyers that after what he called the Great Climate Reckoning of 2045, petroleum goods would be banned globally. He was asked by a customer if he was involved in a viral marketing ploy. Levi responded with what observers said was sincere grief, stating that the American Southwest will become like an inland arid archipelago if people kept burning dead oceans. He was always in a conversational tone. Nonetheless, his remarks had the weight of a prophecy. Raymond Martinez, a store security officer keeping watch from the operations room, saw that Levi didn't exhibit any of the agitation that is usually seen in drunk or mentally ill patrons. Rather, he seemed to have his own schedule in the drugstore. He went up to the Your Consultation window and discreetly told Angela Ruiz, the pharmacist, to pull each batch of the analytic coated X0214. Unaware of the code, Ruiz requested clarification. Levi responded that following long-term use, the drug will be recalled in 2036, extensively prescribed by 2034, and distributed in 2029. Kidney toxicity was discovered. Ruiz informed management and submitted an internal note. Concerns about liability intensified. 3:05 p.m. Levi walked in to produce. They launched into what bystanders later characterized as a 5-minute future food lecture in the busiest area of the shop that day. He advised people to plant drought-tolerant gardens, forecasted a collapse in crop yields, and showed how to check apples for surface nanoplastics. A small group of people assembled, drawn by equal parts discomfort and curiosity. Workers argued over whether to step in. There was little disruption, but the customers should exercise caution when sharing health or safety claims, according to the store's risk assessment methodology. Reconstructing Levi's journey in a documentary style showed that he carefully avoided staff attempts to restrain him. He changed his route around seasonal aisles, while two plainclothes loss prevention specialists followed him around the housewares, keeping conversations civil and public. His spatial awareness would later be noted by investigators. Despite his apparent innate awareness of camera blind spots and escape routes, he never made an attempt to escape. Everything changed around 3:27 p.m. when Levi stopped in front of a children's clothing sale rack and spoke to an 8-year-old boy about the biohazards of synthetic fibers. The mother of the child complained to management, which prompted Deanna, Kim, the assistant manager, to get in touch. Kim went up to Levi, said hello, and inquired as to whether he required medical help. Levi's response was captured on surveillance footage. "The window is closing, but I need humanity's help." He made no angry gestures, gave up no personal identifying other than the name Levi, and complied with Kim's request to wait outside the Vision Center for officials who could better handle temporal concerns. At 3:41 p.m., El Paso police officers showed up. A peaceful exchange can be seen in bodycam footage that was eventually made public in response to Freedom of Information requests. In response to routine inquiries, Levi declared that he had no weapons, no illegal goods, and no plans to commit violence or larceny. He refused to provide identification when asked, saying that personal documents were substrate as is quantum encoded. After a quick pat-down, officers discovered just a pocket notepad with unintelligible symbols, and they safely brought him to a patrol car. Less than 5 minutes passed during the entire apprehension. Levi didn't fight. 4 threads in the post-incident time frame contribute to the case's persistence in local folklore. First, a medical assessment. At the University Medical Center of El Paso, Levi had a mental health evaluation. He was cooperative, lucid, and passed a routine toxicological screen, according to reports. Delusional disorder was taken into consideration as a tentative diagnosis. However, doctors observed no signs of cognitive decline or disarray. Internally coherent, meticulous, and crucially free of conventional grandiosity, Levi's future-focused storyline held up well. He conveyed urgency, without displaying any sense of superiority. The notepad comes in number 2. Levi's scribbled symbols were examined by forensic linguists from a regional task force. Although no cipher matched recognized languages, patterns pointed to an imagined script with a logical syntax. There were glyphs that mimicked astronomical notation and others that looked like molecular diagrams. The notebook, marked as an unsolved code, is still in an evidence vault. 3 forecasts. Online forums aggregated Levi's assertions in a matter of days. A 2036 recall, a 2029 analytical launch, a 2045 climatic disaster, and a 2087 closed-loop economy. They were rejected by skeptics as derivative ecofuturism. Nevertheless, pharmacists discreetly noted research journals for any analytic trials that correspond to the disappearance of code XR-144. Levi was moved to a voluntary outpatient program following a 72-hour observation period. After attending one intake session, he did not show up for subsequent appointments. May 2nd was his final confirmed sighting. 2021, taken by a bus camera in the downtown area. Wearing the same navy windbreaker, he disappeared into downtown traffic without a bag. Since Levi had not given a legitimate identifier, no missing person report was submitted. The Levi event serves as an example of the conflict between human receptivity and empirical reality from a documentary standpoint. To remarkable stories, The man's composed demeanor and encyclopedic delivery were praised by all witnesses. He advocated end-of-world warnings, but no one has explained how he avoided tense confrontation at a busy superstore. According to Walmart's official statement, there were no injuries, and the incident was categorized as a non-violent customer disturbance. However, internal documents acquired by journalists highlight staff members' uncertainty on whether to handle Levi as a public relations problem, a security danger, or a medical risk. The interaction took place during a cultural time that was conducive to apocalyptic thinking, persistent pandemic worrying, climate news saturation, and the spread of conspiracy theories on social media. According to sociologists examining the case, Levi's arguments immediately appealed to the general anxieties, but with the fine details that caused employees to pause. What if, despite the slim likelihood, he was telling the truth? That tiny bit of doubt turned a common customer service oddity into a live thought experiment for everyone in attendance. Rumors began to circulate in the month that followed. A soft-spoken man, Levi, was reportedly given a ride by a truck driver on his way east toward the Gulf Coast. At a public talk in Houston, a graduate student claimed to have met someone who fit Levi's description. Sustainable energy. Before the Q&A was over, the man snuck away after asking insightful questions on closed carbon loops. All of these sightings may be attributed to the human tendency to create myth out of happenstance, and none of them were verified. However, the recollection is still visceral for the Walmart employees in El Paso. Throughout a subsequent internal debrief, store security officer Ronnie Martinez remarked that Levi created the most subdued anarchy he has witnessed throughout his 16 years of employment. He left the entire building skewed as if reality had a hairline split that we could instantly see, but he didn't steal anything, yell, or threaten anyone. Martinez wrote, Maria, a customer service representative, the Levi incident led to a brief revision of Walmart corporate's unconventional behavior policy, instructing managers to expedite mental health outreach calls instead of routing through extended liability chains. A private training video now advises associates. Gonzalez, who was initially the first point of contact, resigned 2 months later, citing ongoing anxiety that any new shopper might bring messages from timelines we can't verify. No definitive answer has ever surfaced regarding Levi's origins, whether he suffered from a highly systematized delusion, crafted a complex performance piece, or, as a few still whisper, actually walked the aisles from a century yet to dawn. If a guest claims to be from another era, treat it first as a health concern. Documentation can come later. The encounter highlights how brittle consensus reality can feel inside the fluorescent maze of a big box store. With just a pocket notebook and conviction, one quiet stranger was able to transform an ordinary Saturday into a question mark that still looms over North Thurgoth Road, like the shimmer of desert heat visible, confusing, and unfathomable. Let's go on to our sixth story. Mirrors have a disconcerting effect on people's minds, and nowhere is this more evident than in retail settings where reflective surfaces are positioned to give the appearance of more space and increased security. Monitoring, however, in the last week of October 2021, the Walmart Supercenter in Salem, following a series of isolated complaints about strange reflections in the store's mirrors, Massachusetts became the scene of a psychological phenomenon that left customers reporting experiences that defied rational explanation and employees questioning their own perception. The investigation was coordinated and would reveal the disturbing power of collective delusion, or perhaps something far more sinister. The first incident report was filed on Monday, October 25th, when customer in what appeared to be a routine complaint about faulty merchandise. Rebecca Winters went to store manager Dale Harrison and explained that she had been trying on reading glasses in the pharmacy section when she noticed that her reflection in the nearby mirror was delayed by about 2 seconds. She showed Harrison the phenomenon by moving her hand back and forth while staring into the mirror, insisting that her reflection was mimicking her movements with a noticeable lag. Harrison watched the demonstration and saw nothing out of the ordinary, so he assumed that Winters was either mistaken or Winters was not readily dismissed, though, as she was a retired physics teacher from nearby Danvers, articulate and methodical in her observations, and she had timed the delay using the stopwatch function on her smartphone, claiming it was consistent across multiple tests. Harrison suggested that viewing conditions or lighting conditions might be the cause of the delay. Winters suggested that the angle might be producing an optical illusion, so he asked Harrison to stand in the same spot and see for himself. Harrison reluctantly agreed, and he spent several minutes moving his hand in front of the mirror. While Winters watched, Harrison saw nothing out of the ordinary, but Winters insisted that his reflection was showing the same 2-con delay she had seen, which could have been written off as a single instance of perceptual confusion. James Rodriguez complained to customer service that the large security mirror in the electronics section showed him standing in a completely different aisle, surrounded by people, and Patricia Chen, a customer, reported that she had momentarily seen herself wearing different clothes, specifically a red sweater instead of the blue jacket she was actually wearing, while examining her appearance in the women's restroom mirror. These 3 additional reports of mirror anomalies came from completely different sections of the store on Tuesday, by items that didn't correspond with his real location. Most unsettling of all, Margaret Forster, an elderly customer, reported that the jewelry section's mirror displayed a reflection of herself that seemed to be around 20 years younger than her true age. By Wednesday, the reports had grown and started to take on a troubling pattern, and customers weren't just complaining about basic. A young mother named Sarah Thompson reported seeing herself in the baby goods section mirror, but her reflection was holding a different child than the one in her actual shopping cart. Teenage customer Derek Mills claimed that his reflection in the mirror was holding a different child. They were experiencing delays or distortions in their reflections, seeing versions of themselves that appeared to exist in alternate realities. Store security officer Lisa Chen started methodically recording these reports, initially thinking that the incidents might be part of a complex prank or social media stunt, but after investigating, she discovered that the customers making these reports came from a variety of backgrounds, had no apparent connection to one another, and that the sporting goods mirror was wearing a Walmart employee uniform complete with a name tag, even though he had never worked at the store. The psychological profile of the affected customers defied easy classification, ranging in age from teenagers to adults, and many customers became emotional while recounting what they had witnessed, and some asked to speak with security because they were worried about their own mental health. Seniors, who came from a variety of socio-economic and ethnic backgrounds, included both first-time visitors to the Salem Walmart and regular Walmart shoppers. Medical histories, when voluntarily provided, revealed no pattern of mental illness or medication use that could account for hallucinations or perceptual disturbances. The only thing that appeared to be common was that all of the incidents happened in the same week and involved mirrors spread across the store. Thursday's report was the most disturbing to date. Dale Harrison received a request from a customer named Michael Porter, a local lawyer who has no history of mental health problems, asking that the store's security cameras be examined. Porter stated that he was shopping for office supplies when he saw his reflection in the mirror next to the printer cartridges section, doing things he wasn't actually doing, specifically picking different items off the shelves. Porter, whose legal background made him particularly credible and methodical in his documentation, had taken notes on his smartphone, recording the time, location, and specific details of what he observed, and he had attempted to photograph the phenomenon. Though his images showed him looking at items he had no interest in, and even seeming to be conversing with other reflected customers who weren't in the actual aisle. Porter's request for a review of the security camera was an intriguing test case if his allegations were true. The camera's placement to watch the supply have captured him standing still and gazing into the mirror, even as his alleged complex behaviors were being performed by his reflection. The results of the camera review were both comforting and extremely concerning. The video showed Porter standing in front of the mirror for about 8 minutes, moving his hand or shifting his position occasionally, but never displaying the complex behaviors he claimed to have seen in his reflection. However, a promotional display that had been put up earlier that week blocked the camera angle that should have captured the surface of the mirror. So even though Porter's actual movements were captured, there was no visual record of what the mirror itself looked like had been showing. By Friday, there had been 15 reported mirror anomalies, and Dale Harrison was in a situation very different from anything he had experienced in his 20 years as a retail manager. The reports were getting more detailed and unsettling, with customers claiming to see reflections of themselves shopping with different family members, working in different professions, or living in completely different eras. Harrison decided to investigate, spending long hours looking at each of the mirrors that had been mentioned in customer reports, and found nothing out of the ordinary about the mirrors themselves. But one particularly unsettling report was from a customer who said her reflection showed her as a young child, complete with memories of conversations and experiences from decades earlier. Harrison's investigation did uncover one previously overlooked detail. All of the affected mirrors had been cleaned and recoded over the weekend as part of a regular maintenance schedule. Other than that, they seemed to be standard retail security and convenience mirrors that had been installed and maintained properly, with normal lighting in each area and no obvious environmental factors that might cause optical illusions or perceptual disturbances. Harrison contacted the service supervisor and found out that the crew had used a new cleaning solution that was supposed to provide enhanced clarity and anti-fog properties. The supervisor assured Harrison that the product was completely safe and had been used successfully at dozens of other retail locations. The work had been done by a contracted cleaning service that Walmart had used for several years without any problems. Mirror reports temporarily decreased over the weekend, perhaps as a result of increased customer traffic and a decrease in the amount of time spent staring at one's reflection. However, on Monday, incidents resumed, this time involving store employees who had previously been dubious of customer claims. Cashier Amanda Rodriguez reported seeing her reflection scanning items and interacting with customers even while she was on break and standing away from her register. The employee reports were especially important because they came from people who knew the store environment and had no apparent motivation to fabricate experiences. Tony Hernandez, a stock clerk, reported that his reflection in the loading dock mirror seemed to be unloading entirely different merchandise than what he was actually handling. These employees were also trained observers who were used to keeping an eye on their surroundings for security and safety reasons. Harrison became increasingly concerned about the situation and contacted Walmart's corporate risk management department, which sent a team of experts to look into the phenomenon. Their reports gave the customer complaints more legitimacy and implied that whatever was going on was more than just suggestible shoppers being swayed by local rumors or social media. A behavioral psychologist with expertise in retail settings and a security consultant conducted an investigation to determine whether any environmental factors, such as electromagnetic interference, lighting frequencies, air quality problems, or acoustic anomalies, were responsible for the reported experiences. While the investigation produced some intriguing results, none of them offered a comprehensive explanation for the phenomena that were reported. Air quality measurements were normal, ruling out the possibility that chemical vapors were causing hallucinations. Electromagnetic readings showed elevated levels near certain mirrors, but not significantly higher than those found in any modern retail environment with extensive electronic systems. And, most intriguingly, The behavioral psychologist observed that the store's layout and lighting created what she believed to be subtle optical effects. The new cleaning solution contained a chemical compound that could theoretically create subtle optical effects under certain lighting conditions, but controlled tests failed to reproduce the complex behaviors described by customers and employees, referred to as psychological pressure points, where patrons may be more vulnerable to perceptual disruptions. Fluorescent lighting, reflective surfaces, wide aisles, and continuous background noise may induce mild dissociation in certain people, increasing their likelihood of experiencing odd perceptions or false memories. The investigation ended without determining a clear cause for the reported mirror anomalies, and the corporate team suggested replacing all impacted mirrors, upgrading lighting in specific areas, and hiring more staff. The psychological consultant's final report acknowledged that the Salem incident was a fascinating case study in collective perception and the power of environmental factors to influence human consciousness in retail settings, but it also included training on customer service, protocols for unusual complaints. The mirror incident stopped entirely after the affected mirrors were replaced, and no similar reports have been recorded at the Salem location since November 2021. The Salem mirror incidents, however, remain unexplained, existing in the uncomfortable space between rational explanation and inexplicable experience that characterizes the most disturbing retail encounters. Nevertheless, the experience had a lasting effect on both employees and customers who had witnessed or experienced the phenomenon. Some customers reported that they still felt uneasy around mirrors in other retail environments, and some store employees admitted to avoiding certain areas of the store during their shifts. Let's move on to our seventh story. Security footage timestamp 234,712, December 18, 2020. Whether the result of environmental factors, collective suggestion, or something more enigmatic, they serve as a reminder that even the most ordinary commercial spaces can become theaters for experiences that challenge our understanding of perception and reality. The footage was leaked by a former employee who claimed corporate management was suppressing the footage, which was taken on the store's internal surveillance system at Walmart Supercenter, North Main Street, Roswell, New Mexico. The incident involved customer identification number 4471, who was later identified as Maria Santos, a 28-year-old local resident who had no history of unusual behavior or mental health issues. The sequence starts with Santos entering through the main entrance at 23:45 and 3 seconds, roughly 15 minutes before store closing. The quality is standard definition, typical of retail security cameras, with occasional digital artifacts and pixelation that some viewers have mistakenly interpreted as evidence of tampering. Nevertheless, independent analysis by digital forensics experts has confirmed the authenticity of the recording. Security camera angle SA picking up a shopping cart from the corral and heading down the main aisle toward the produce section. But nothing about her behavior at this point points to anything out of the ordinary. She seems to be alone, carrying a small purse, and walking at a normal pace toward the grocery section, possibly picking up items for the next day. Camera angle SA12, above the produce section, shows Santos inspecting. Santos appears to pause mid-motion, her hand extended toward the Apple display, and she remains completely motionless for exactly 47 seconds. During this time, she doesn't blink, doesn't react to other customers walking past her, and keeps her physical position without any visible movement. The timestamp reads 234,641 when the first anomaly occurs. At timestamp 234,728, Santos abruptly returns to normal motion, continuing to choose apples as if nothing had happened, and she shows no awareness of the extended pause before moving on to the banana display. The video shows her in complete stillness, as if someone had hit a pause button on her personal timeline while the rest of the world went on around her. While Santos is clearly visible at the banana display in camera SA12, camera SA15 simultaneously captures what appears to be the same woman examining organic vegetables about 30 feet away. This is in contrast to camera angle SA15, which covers the adjacent organic produce section, which captures something that forensic analysts have been unable to explain. The Santos at the banana display moves purposefully and efficiently, while the figure in the organic section appears more hesitant, often stopping to read labels and compare. The dual appearance lasts for 3 minutes and 17 seconds. Both figures move independently, choose different items, and exhibit unique body language and shopping patterns. The next phase of the incident is captured at timestamp 2351:02. Santos approaches the milk refrigerators, but instead of opening a door to select products, she walks straight through the closed glass door as if it were open air. Despite being within clear sight lines of each other, neither figure acknowledges the other's presence. While standing among the milk cartons and dairy products, she continues to choose items from inside the refrigerated unit, appearing to be shopping normally from this interior position, reaching for items and looking at expiration dates. The video clearly shows her passing through the solid glass barrier without any visible contact or resistance. Demonstrates the same woman at the frozen food area at the same time, where she seems to be engaged in a lively conversation with someone, not shown on the security footage. Audio from the closest microphone picks up bits of what appears to be a phone call, but examination shows that Santos is not holding a communication device. The conversation contains phrases like, "Yes, I can now see them," and the selection is far superior to what we had anticipated. However, no audio channel records a response. The most unsettling part of the video starts at timestamp 235,433, when Santos is seen from 4 separate camera angles at once. Camera SA0 then shows her back at the camera. SA18 continues to show her inside the dairy refrigerator, now seemingly rearranging items on the shelves. Camera SA12 keeps visual contact with her in the produce section, where she seems to be replenishing the apple display rather than shopping from it. And camera SA25, covering the pharmacy area. It shows her standing at the prescription pickup counter, seemingly interacting with the overnight pharmacist. Later, independent verification with pharmacy records confirmed that no prescriptions were processed for Maria Santos on December 18, 2020, and the overnight pharmacist, when interviewed, had no recollection of any interactions with customers during the time frame depicted in the footage. Security logs show that the pharmacy section at timestamp 135,715, all camera feeds simultaneously lose visual contact with Santos in every location. The figures simply disappear between frames rather than leaving the frame or moving out of camera range. Was closed and secured during the incident, making any customer interaction impossible. Camera SA03 of the customer service desk captured the aftermath of the incident at timestamp 00247. Frame-by-frame analysis reveals Santos is clearly present in frame 235,714 across all 4 camera angles, and completely absent in frame 235,715. There is no motion blur, fade effect, or transitional imagery that would suggest normal movement or departure. With a shopping cart full of goods, Santos walks up to the counter and checks out normally with overnight cashier Dennis Kim, who later verified the transaction and described Santos as a friendly, regular customer. The receipt, which was kept as proof, demonstrates that she bought apples, bananas, organic vegetables, milk, and frozen foods, all of which match the products that were chosen from the different camera angles. Additional troubling information was disclosed in Kim's interview, where he stated that Santos expressed admiration for the store's new design and praised the effectiveness of the multiple shopping zones. When Kim questioned Santos about it, she clarified that she valued the ability to shop in several areas at once, which she characterized as a time-saving innovation. Security review protocols required overnight supervisor Rachel Torres to review any unusual footage before filing daily reports, but Kim assumed she was referring to some sort of customer service program he wasn't familiar with and didn't pursue the topic further. Torres later testified that when she first viewed the surveillance recordings, she thought there had been a technical malfunction causing multiple camera feeds to display the same customer simultaneously. However, when she tried to correlate the footage with other security systems, including motion sensors and electronic frame authentication protocols, verified that the video stream was continuous and unaltered. Timestamp verification matched the store's central security server logs. Digital forensics analysis commissioned by Walmart's corporate security department found no evidence of tampering, editing, or digital manipulation. And article surveillance logs. The data verified that customer activity had been detected in all 4 locations at the time shown in the video recordings. The incident report that Torres filed was initially categorized as a technical anomaly and sent to the facility's management department for investigation of possible camera malfunctions. The technical report said that although the content of the footage was extremely unusual, the recording itself was authentic and unaltered. Corporate security escalated the incident to Walmart's loss prevention department after technicians thoroughly tested all surveillance equipment and found no hardware problems, software bugs, or system errors that could explain the anomalies that were recorded. All cameras were operating within normal parameters, and test recordings revealed no effects of duplication or multi-location imaging. Investigation unit that thoroughly investigated Maria Santos's background found that she was a local elementary school teacher with no criminal record, no affiliation with any organizations that could attempt retail fraud or security breaches, and no technical know-how that would allow her to manipulate sophisticated surveillance systems. Friends and family characterized her as trustworthy, realistic, and someone who would be unable to plan any kind of complex hoax. In interviews with loss prevention investigators, Santos described her shopping trip on December 18th as entirely ordinary and unremarkable, and she had no recollection of being in several places at once, going through glass barriers, or speaking with invisible upon viewing portions of the security footage. She acknowledged that the person in the recordings was unquestionably her, but she was perplexed and worried about the apparent irregularities. A psychological assessment found no evidence of delusional thinking, memory issues, or dissociative disorders. The leaked footage initially surfaced on social media. Marcus Webb, a former Walmart security technician, posted on media platforms in March 2021, alleging that the company was aware of ongoing temporal anomalies affecting customer behavior in specific stores, and that corporate management had ordered the incident to be classified, instructing employees not to discuss the case. Webb also claimed that similar footage from other Walmart locations had been suppressed. Although the company's legal department filed cease and desist orders against several websites hosting the leaked footage, citing privacy violations and concerns about proprietary security information, the official response denied any suppression of security footage and claimed that the Santos incident was a single technical malfunction that had been fixed through equipment upgrades. These legal actions unintentionally raised public interest in the case and sparked widespread speculation about corporate cover-ups. Skeptics suggested that the incident was a complex hoax involving sophisticated video editing techniques, while independent paranormal investigators who examined the footage offered a variety of theories ranging from advanced holographic technology to interdimensional phenomena. Although the forensic analysis confirmed the authenticity of the footage, scientists who study temporal mechanics pointed out that the apparent simultaneous multiple presence could theoretically result from quantum mechanical effects. The Santos incident is one of the most well-documented and extensively studied cases of apparent temporal anomaly captured on surveillance footage, and the combination of genuine video evidence supporting witness testimony and in-depth technical analysis has made it impossible to dismiss as mere fraud or misperception, even though they admit that such phenomena would be unprecedented at the macroscopic scale seen in the recordings. They say it happened on a foggy October night in 2017, when the autumn mist rolled off the Ohio River and settled over the hills of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, like a grey shroud draped over the memories of, whether it was the result of unidentified technology, extraordinary natural phenomena, or something beyond current scientific understanding. The footage continues to challenge conventional assumptions about the nature of space, time, and human consciousness in retail environments. That brings us to our eighth story. What allegedly happened at the Walmart Supercenter on State Route 2 that October evening has become the subject of whispered legend, transmitted through online forums and late-night conversations in dimly lit towns. The locals will tell you that Point Pleasant has always been a place where the ordinary world grows thin, where the Morphman once cast his shadow over the Silver Bridge, and where strange disappearances have punctuated the town's history like dark punctuation marks in an unfinished story. Diners, the narrative, which has become part of the local mythology, states that on October 13, 2017, at approximately 9:30 p.m., a woman called Catherine Mills entered the store. The date itself had significance in those who claim to know Catherine described her as a practical woman in her early 40s, a single mother who worked as a bookkeeper for a local insurance office, and she had driven to Walmart that evening to pick up groceries for the weekend. The story was told on Friday the 13th in a town already steeped in supernatural lore. The story starts with Catherine entering the store, which was captured on the security camera above the main entrance. According to witnesses who say they saw the footage, Catherine is a normal height woman with a brown leather purse and a dark green jacket. She seems to choose a shopping cart and then vanishes into the store's interior, following the same route taken by a store employee from that shift, or at least someone claiming to be a store employee from that shift, has added to the growing legend over the years. But nothing about her entrance suggested anything unusual, nothing that would hint at the mystery that was about to unfold. She saw thousands of customers every day. Several alleged witnesses recalled Catherine asking about the store's closing time, as if she was worried about finishing her shopping before the 11 p.m., and they described her as methodically moving through the store, starting in the produce section before moving through the various departments. She was also described as courteous when interacting with staff, asking standard questions about product locations and availability. Cut off. Catherine's shopping habits, which several purported witnesses describe as becoming more erratic as the evening went on, are where the story takes its mysterious turn. She was reportedly observed going back to the same aisles repeatedly, not because she had forgotten anything, but rather because she was looking for things that should have been there, but weren't. According to the legend, Catherine's conduct grew increasingly troubling as the night went on, and she was allegedly spotted standing around asking about things the store had never carried, brands that didn't exist, and department layouts that didn't match the actual store design. Some versions of the story said she was having quiet conversations with people who weren't there, but she was never seen using a phone or any other communication device. She would stand still for long periods of time in different aisles, staring at empty spaces on shelves, as if she could see merchandise that others couldn't, politely declining assistance from staff members and continuing her increasingly aimless wandering through the store. As closing time drew nearer, the mystery grew more complex. Store staff making their last rounds reported that Catherine was still in the building, but her precise location seemed to change each time someone went to look for her. She would be seen in electronics, then immediately in household goods, then in the pharmacy area, as if she were moving through the store at an impossible speed or showing up in multiple places at once. Management allegedly made multiple announcements over the intercom asking customers to finish their purchases. However, Catherine Mills either did not hear these statements or chose to disregard them, and she just disappeared at exactly 11 p.m. when the business officially closed to customers. No proof of her departing by any of the exits was captured by the security cameras placed throughout the store. The search for Catherine became the most dramatic aspect of the legend, with the video purportedly showing her shopping cart, still filled with the items she had chosen, abandoned in the middle of aisle 7 between the coffee and breakfast cereals, and her brown leather purse, which contained her driver's license, credit cards, and the shopping list she had written earlier that evening, found on the floor nearby. The building was completely locked down, with officers stationed at all exits to ensure that Catherine couldn't leave undetected, and security cameras were reviewed frame by frame, showing Catherine's movements throughout the evening, but providing no information. Store management allegedly called local police, who arrived to conduct a thorough search of the premises, systematically inspecting every aisle, storage room, and potential hiding place. Catherine's car was in the parking lot outside the store, exactly where she had left it. Her 2015 Honda Civic was unlocked, her keys were still in the ignition, and her cell phone was resting on the passenger seat. It displayed no recent calls or texts that could account for her disappearance, and her shopping list, which was discovered in her purse and captured on camera, included standard grocery items, milk. The police investigation, according to the different versions of the story, lasted for several days, and when the search of Catherine's apartment revealed no evidence of struggle or that she had planned to disappear, they found bread, eggs, coffee, and other household supplies. Nothing on the list indicated any unusual purpose for her visit to the store. Friends and family described her as trustworthy and responsible, someone who would never just disappear without explanation, especially leaving her car and personal belongings behind. She had performed exceptionally well at work, her finances were stable, and she had no known personal issues that would justify a voluntary disappearance. As the days stretched into weeks, according to some versions of the legend, Catherine Mills' case became the subject of endless speculation and conspiracy theories. She may have found something in the store that she wasn't supposed to see, which led to her being removed by unknown parties. Other theories suggest that she may have somehow slipped into an alternate timeline or parallel dimension, which would explain her apparent ability to be in multiple locations at once prior to her disappearance. Local paranormal enthusiasts point out that the Walmart was constructed on land that had once been part of the McClintic Wildlife Management Area, where many Mothman sightings had been reported in the 1960s, and they suggest that the area retains some sort of supernatural energy that occasionally manifests in mysterious disappearances and unexplained events. Interpretations of the story link it to Point Pleasant's history of unexplained phenomena, suggested more commonplace explanations for the legend, such as the possibility that Catherine Mills left the store through an unmonitored emergency or service exit, and then came back later to get her car in the dark. Others suggest that the story is an urban legend that has developed over time, with each recounting adding new details and supernatural elements to what could have been a straightforward case of a confused or disoriented customer. It is now impossible to separate the truth about Catherine Mills firsthand, while others claim to be police officers who were involved in the investigation. Efforts to confirm the story's fundamental facts have been frustratingly inconclusive. No reports in October 2017 Point Pleasant police records match the details of Catherine Mills' purported disappearance. No incident involving a missing customer at the Point Pleasant location has ever been acknowledged by the Walmart Corporation, and no articles about a mysterious disappearance at the store have appeared in local newspapers during that time period. The storm legend of Catherine Mills, however, has become part of Point Pleasant's continuing relationship with the unexplained, and with the Mothman and the collapse of the Silver Bridge, the town's list of unexplained events, visitors frequently ask locals about the Walmart disappearance, and some even make pilgrimages to the store with the hopes of experiencing supernatural phenomena themselves. The lack of official documentation hasn't lessened the story's hold on the local imagination, though. Whether Catherine Mills ever existed, whether she vanished from a Point Pleasant Walmart, or whether her story is true, it offers a modern supernatural narrative that links the town's past mysteries to its present reality, turns a typical commercial space into a place of potential wonder and terror, and above all maintains the community's identity as a place where the impossible might happen, where the lines between the known and the unknown remain perpetually blurred. Symbolizes the collective unconscious fears of disappearing into the anonymous spaces of contemporary consumer culture. The legend keeps changing, adding new details with every recounting, bringing new witnesses out of the shadows of memory, and generating new theories about what might have happened on that hazy October night when they claim one woman entered a store and just vanished. In the fluorescent lit aisles of a big box store, surrounded by security cameras and the electronic monitoring systems, Catherine Mills allegedly proved that it's still possible to vanish completely, leaving behind only questions and a legend that gets stronger with each retelling. This story continues to be told because it speaks to basic fears about identity, surveillance, and the possibility of vanishing without a trace in a world that claims to watch and record everything. My name is Jake Martinez, and I worked overnight stock crew at the Supercenter on Ming Avenue for 3 years before I quit after this incident. I need to tell you about what happened at the Walmart in Bakersfield, California, because I was there that night, and what I saw contradicts everything I believed I knew about human behavior and the fine line between normalcy and madness. I wanted to start by stating that I'm not the type of person who believes in supernatural nonsense or conspiracy theories, and that I'm a practical guy who worked a practical job moving boxes and restocking shelves to help pay for community college. I'm talking to you now because I can't keep carrying this alone, and perhaps someone out there can help me understand what we all witnessed on June 4th, 2019. It was an honest job, and despite the perception of Walmart, the majority of my co-workers were good people just trying to make ends meet. That Tuesday night began like any other. The overnight shift attracted a certain type of worker people who needed the hours, who preferred working when the store was quiet, who found peace in the rhythmic work of inventory and organization. 6 people made up our crew: me, Trevor, who worked with electronics, Maria, who worked in grocery, Carlos, who worked in sporting goods, Sandra, who worked in health and beauty, and Dennis, our supervisor. We had been working together for months and had cultivated the easy camaraderie that comes from working late shifts together and respecting each other's ability to complete tasks quickly. Dennis was fair but strict. The store officially closed at 11 p.m. and by midnight, we were well into our restocking routine. I was working in housewares, unloading, and we all enjoyed that he treated us like adults rather than micromanaging every activity. There is something serene about bringing order out of chaos, about turning a disorganized stockroom into well-organized shelves that customers would appreciate the following day. I found the methodical task of sorting boxes of kitchen supplies and arranging them in accordance with the planogram layout that corporate had sent down to be strangely satisfying. Maria called Dennis on the radio at 1:30 a.m. to report unusual customer behavior in the grocery section, explaining that about 15 customers had entered the store through the main entrance and were now shopping together as a group. This was a warning sign that something was amiss, as the store was supposed to be close to customers and our security procedures were in place. Demanded that all entrances be locked, with the exception of emergency exits. Dennis checked right away with Robert, the overnight security guard, who verified that all entrances were secure and that he hadn't let any customers in since closing time. Robert checked the perimeter quickly and reported that the parking lot was empty, save for staff cars, but Maria insisted that she could see customers moving through the grocery aisles, choosing items and placing them. 3 years after Maria's report, I followed Dennis and Robert to the grocery section to look into it. What we discovered there still bothers me. The aisles were filled with what seemed to be regular shoppers, men and women of all ages, some shopping alone, others in pairs or small family groups, all dressed in regular street clothes, acting courteously, and appearing to be doing their usual grocery shopping. But there was something deeply wrong with these customers. It took me a few minutes to figure out what was wrong. But they moved through the aisles in a strange synchronization, as if they were following a predetermined pattern rather than making their own shopping decisions. When one person stopped to look at a product, others in adjacent aisles would pause at precisely the same time. Dennis approached one of the customers, a middle-aged woman in a blue sweater who was looking at cereal boxes, and politely explained that the store was closed, and asked how she had entered the building. The woman looked at him with what appeared to be genuine confusion and explained that she had entered through the main entrance, which had been open when she arrived, asking for directions to the frozen food section and showing him a shopping list written on notebook paper. The thing that bothered me the most about this encounter was how normal it seemed at first glance. The woman was courteous, articulate, and truly perplexed as to why we were questioning her presence in the store. She was neither defensive nor aggressive, nor did she appear to be under the influence of alcohol or drugs, nor did she exhibit any signs of mental illness or disorientation. I followed along, interested to find out how our security had been compromised, and Robert decided to escort the woman to the main entrance to find out how she got into the store. She was just a regular person going about her regular shopping, but she shouldn't have been able to enter the building. When we arrived at the entrance, Robert used his when questioned about how she got there. The woman pointed to the parking lot and described the location and appearance of her car, and Robert checked the lot again and confirmed that there were no customer vehicles there. The woman appeared surprised by this and insisted that the doors had been open when she arrived. But when confronted with this contradiction, she became visibly confused, and as the other customers went about their shopping, seemingly oblivious to or unconcerned with the investigation occurring at the entrance, she asked if we could assist her in finding her car, expressing concern that it might have been stolen while she was shopping. Trevor reported a similar customer presence in electronics, where Dennis decided to call the Bakersfield Police Department, explaining that we had several trespassers in the store who claimed to have entered through locked doors and whose vehicles were not in the parking lot. They were looking at televisions and cell phones with the same coordinated behavior we had seen in grocery. Carlos discovered customers in sporting goods, looking mechanically through fishing gear and camping supplies. Send officers to look into the problem. We were instructed to wait for police to arrive and not address the customers directly, so we kept a closer eye on them throughout the 20-minute wait. As we watched, their conduct grew more unsettling. A young man in the electronics department put 17 identical phone chargers in his cart. An elderly woman in the health and beauty department gathered dozens of bottles of the same shampoo, and a family in the toy department gathered several copies of the same children's game. They were shopping for specific items based on predetermined lists, but their choices made no sense. Despite shopping in close proximity, the customers never acknowledged each other's presence, spoke to each other, or engaged in any of the typical social behaviors you'd expect in a crowded store. What was most unsettling was their total lack of interaction. They moved around each other with fluid precision, as if they were following invisible traffic patterns that prevented them from colliding or interfering with each other's. The police officers were initially dubious, speculating that we might have neglected to lock some entrances, or that the customers might be actual customers who had entered before closing time. But their opinions soon changed after we took them through the store to observe the customers and explain the security concerns. When they tried to speak with the customers directly, Officer Jennifer Walsh went up to a man in the pharmacy area who was gathering a lot of over-the-counter medications and asked for identification. The man gave her the same perplexed look we had seen earlier and said he was buying medical supplies for his family and asked if there was something wrong with the items he had chosen. The second officer, Michael Torres, had a similar experience with a woman in the grocery section who was loading her cart with canned goods, and when he asked her for his driver's license, he reached into his wallet and handed her what appeared to be a blank piece of paper. When he asked her how she paid, she gave him what appeared to be play money, colourful paper rectangles that looked more like children's toy currency than actual bills or credit cards. As the police investigation proceeded, the customer's behaviour became even more strange as they started checking out at the self-service stations, scanning their items and putting their play money into the machines as if they were making regular transactions. She appeared truly perplexed when Officer Torres explained that this wasn't acceptable payment for merchandise. The customers appeared satisfied with their purchases and started bagging their items as if the transactions had been completed successfully. Even though the machines obviously rejected the fake currency, Officer Walsh radioed for additional backup and asked that a mental health specialist be sent to assess the customers, explaining that although they weren't acting aggressively or posing an immediate threat, their collective delusion about conducting legitimate around 3:15 a.m. The situation reached its peak when all 15 customers simultaneously left their shopping carts and headed toward the main entrance, walking in single file and exhibiting the same synchronized behavior we had seen throughout the evening. These transactions suggested some sort of group psychological episode that required professional assessment. Officer Torres unlocked the doors, and the customers filed out into the parking lot, where they scattered in various directions and vanished into the darkness. The aftermath of this incident left our entire crew shaken and perplexed. Police reports noted the unusual customer behavior, but they provided no explanation for how the individuals had entered the building. When they arrived at the locked doors, they stood patiently as if waiting for someone to open them. Store management thoroughly investigated our security protocols and discovered no breaches or equipment malfunctions that could account for the incident. The security camera review revealed that the customers were moving through the store exactly as we had observed, but it did not provide footage of their entrance or exit from the building. I quit my job at Walmart 2 weeks later, not because I was scared to work there, but because I couldn't reconcile what I had witnessed with my understanding of reality. After reviewing the case, corporate security specialists suggested more training and protocol updates, but they also acknowledged that the situation was unprecedented in their experience. The incident made me reevaluate my basic beliefs about consciousness. Let's move on to our 10th story. What if I told you that the odd incidents we've been investigating across different Walmart stores aren't isolated incidents, but rather part of a larger pattern, one that was planned by forces? I share this story not because I expect anyone to believe it, but because I hope someone out there might have gone through something similar and be able to help me understand what we all witnessed that night in Bakersfield. Beyond normal observation, a chilling theory has been put forth by some investigators and insiders in response to a string of unexplained events reported at Walmart supercenters across the country between 2016 and 2022, which may be the outward manifestation of a clandestine experimental program testing human behavioral responses on a large scale. Think about the evidence we've already looked at. A man who lived in a Louisiana store for 3 days without being noticed, displaying a sophisticated understanding of operational patterns. A Phoenix customer who was stalked using exact mirroring, behavior that suggested sophisticated surveillance techniques. A complex toilet paper heist in a worker in Tulsa discovers corporate priorities that prioritize liability assessment over human dignity. A time traveler in El Paso exhibits a remarkable understanding of future events and local infrastructure. A mirror anomaly in Salem defies conventional physics. Portland executes with military precision and insider knowledge and surveillance. When considered as isolated incidents, these incidents appear to be random manifestations of human eccentricity, mental health crises, or technological glitches. For example, footage in Roswell shows multiple simultaneous presences, a disappearance in Point Pleasant that left no trace despite extensive security systems, and synchronized customers in Bakersfield acting more like programmed entities than unique human beings. However, when examined as individual data points within a broader pattern, they start to paint a troubling picture of systematic experimentation and manipulation within America's most pervasive retail environment. The sophisticated nature of the behaviors observed, the consistency of timing, and the inability of traditional explanations to explain these phenomena all suggest organized intervention rather than chance. The company has been involved in a classified research program that aims to test the limits of human perception, behavior modification, and social control within controlled commercial environments, according to documents purportedly leaked by former Walmart corporate employees. The documents, which have made their way online despite legal efforts to keep them private, describe a multi-phase experimental protocol known as Project Consumer Dynamics that has been in operation since 2015. According to the leaked materials, Walmart's corporate research division, a number of large technology companies, and unidentified government agencies collaborated to develop sophisticated crowd control and behavioral prediction systems. These sources claim that Walmart's vast customer database, extensive store network, and sophisticated surveillance infrastructure make it the perfect place to test psychological manipulation techniques on a scale that is not feasible in traditional research settings. Subsonic audio frequencies that influence perception and decision-making, carefully calibrated lighting systems that can elicit particular emotional states, and sophisticated facial recognition software that can identify individuals appropriate for targeted psychological interventions are just a few examples of the technological and environmental manipulations used in the purported experimental protocols to change customer and employee behavior in quantifiable ways. Marcus Davidson, a former Walmart IT specialist who has publicly discussed his experiences despite having signed numerous non-disclosure agreements, says he was involved in the installation of what he was told were enhanced security systems that were actually sophisticated behavioral monitoring and manipulation tools that could track customer movement patterns, analyze body language and facial expressions, and even use advanced biometric scanning to detect physiological indicators like stress levels and heart rate. According to Davidson's testimony, the odd occurrences we've looked at could be either deliberate experiments with these experimental systems or unintended consequences of their implementation. He recounts seeing command centers where technicians simultaneously monitored several store locations, modifying environmental conditions and monitoring the behavioral reactions of individual people who were chosen for observation based on psychological profiles created by artificial intelligence algorithms. According to leaked documentation, the selection criteria for experimental subjects give preference to people who exhibit certain personality traits that make them vulnerable to environmental manipulation, such as high suggestibility, social isolation, financial stress, and specific neurological markers that can be identified through behavioral analysis. It appears that the objective is to create methods of influencing human behavior that could be used in a variety of settings outside of retail settings. Dr. Sarah Chen, a former behavioral psychologist who says she consulted for the program, describes experiments intended to test reality distortion protocols that could cause people to doubt their own perceptions and memories. Over the years, a number of whistleblowers have surfaced, each contributing pieces to what seems to be a larger puzzle. The tests allegedly involved advanced holographic technology, electromagnetic field manipulation, and Walmart already maintains advanced surveillance networks, environmental control systems, and data analysis capabilities that could be modified. For experimental purposes, the addition of specialized equipment for behavioral manipulation could be gradually integrated and disguised as ordinary operations. The technological infrastructure needed for such experiments would be extensive, but not impossible to implement within Walmart's current operational framework. Routine technological upgrades. A number of concerning correlations have been found by independent researchers who have examined the pattern of incidents across multiple Walmart locations. Strange events frequently occur at the same time as corporate technical teams visit, new security equipment is installed, or store computer systems are updated. Geographic clustering indicates that specific regions are being used as test sites for various experimental protocols. The psychological profiles of those impacted also exhibit striking consistency, with many of the individuals involved in these incidents reporting behavioral, memory, and perception changes that continue long after their Walmart encounters. Many of these individuals are going through life transitions, financial hardships, or social isolation, circumstances that would make them especially vulnerable to environmental manipulation and less likely to report unusual experiences or be believed. If they did, this suggests a systematic targeting process instead of random selection of experimental subjects. Walmart's official statements categorically deny any involvement in these allegations. Corporate responses to questions about these allegations have been consistent but revealing. The company's aggressive pursuit of legal action against whistleblowers and its efforts to suppress leaked documentation suggest that significant resources are being devoted to maintaining secrecy around these activities. The broader implications of a coordinated Walmart experimentation program extend far beyond retail operations. Behavioral experimentation, while simultaneously invoking legal protections for proprietary research and development activities, the American public may be unwittingly contributing to the development of technologies intended to subvert their autonomy and free will, and the success of such a program would show that extensive human experimentation can be carried out in commercial settings. If a large corporation can successfully implement sophisticated behavioral manipulation techniques within commercial environments, the potential applications for political control, social engineering, and mass persuasion become virtually limitless. The Walmart experimentation theory is based on largely circumstantial evidence, which would constitute a fundamental violation of ethical research principles and informed consent requirements that have governed human experimentation since the post-World War II establishment of international research ethics standards, plain sight, concealed as routine commercial activities, and shielded by corporate secrecy and legal intimidation. The consistency and sophistication of the reported phenomena, along with the documented history of corporate and government involvement in unethical human experimentation, make these allegations impossible to dismiss completely. As we've seen throughout these stories, the line between ordinary retail experience and extraordinary psychological manipulation is blurred. The allegations include leaked documents of questionable authenticity, anonymous whistleblower testimony, and patterns that could be explained by coincidence or confirmation bias. May be thinner than most people realize. These incidents serve as a reminder that our most routine activities may be far from routine in their implications for human consciousness and social control, whether they are the obvious results of a well-planned experimental program or just the odd accidents that happen when millions of people interact within artificial commercial environments on a daily basis. The truth about what's actually happening in America's Walmart stores may never be known. The possibility that our shopping trips are being used as opportunities for psychological experimentation is no longer the stuff of science fiction. Rather, it may be the hidden reality of modern American life, completely revealed, but the questions raised by these incidents demand serious consideration. Let's move on to our 11th and final story. Walmart's corporate headquarters in Bentonville, Arkansas, leaked an internal document last July 2025 that shocked the retail industry and changed our understanding of the incidents we've been looking into. The 47-page classified report, stamped Confidential Project Nexus, was anonymously delivered to Washington Post investigative journalist Sarah Chen, exposing the Project Nexus, as it was codenamed internally, is the largest covert human experimentation program carried out on American soil since the CYA-SMKULT experiments of the Cold War era. The document, which has been verified by multiple digital forensics experts, details a comprehensive behavioral research program that has been operating within Walmart stores since 2018. The difference is that, instead of operating in secret government according to the leaked materials, every single incident we've looked at tonight was not a random occurrence, but rather a carefully planned experiment intended to test the boundaries of human perception, behavior modification, and social control. These experiments were carried out in plain sight, masquerading as regular retail operations in stores visited by millions of unwary customers. The man who lived undetected in the Louisiana store for 3 days wasn't simply, he was a desperate person in need of shelter, a paid test subject whose job it was to assess staff response procedures and security flaws, and the advanced understanding of store operations he demonstrated was not the consequence of close observation, but rather of training from Walmart's Behavioral Research Division. The Phoenix stalking incident turned out to be an experiment with mirror psychology techniques, where trained agents were the complex toilet paper heist in Portland was actually a proof-of-concept operation designed to test insider threat scenarios and employee loyalty during crisis situations. The perpetrators were not desperate unemployed workers, but professional consultants hired to carry out a scenario that would generate specific psychological responses in both staff and customers. They were instructed to mimic customer movements in order to study stress responses and decision-making under perceived threat conditions. And customers, most troublingly, the document shows that the employee who found the dead customer in Tulsa was purposefully put in that position to examine moral decision-making under corporate pressure. The delayed emergency response was a controlled variable intended to test how long an employee would put human dignity ahead of corporate authority, not a result of callous management priorities. Leaked materials include detailed profiles of all individuals involved in these incidents, including psychological assessments, financial histories, and predictive behavioral models, used to select them as experimental subjects. The selection criteria prioritized individuals who were socially isolated, financially vulnerable, or going through personal crises that would make them less likely to report unusual experiences or be believed if they did. The incident was planned to cause the greatest amount of psychological trauma while maintaining legal protection for the company. The report mentions collaborations with the Department of Homeland Security for research on crowd control, the National Institute of Mental Health for psychological manipulation studies, and several large technology companies for sophisticated surveillance and behavioral modification systems. Speak Out. Project Nexus functioned through a network of specialized contractors, academic researchers, and government agencies that provided both funding and technological support. Stores were outfitted with subsonic audio systems that could elicit particular emotional states, electromagnetic field generators that could impact cognitive function, and sophisticated holographic projection systems that could produce the temporal and perceptual anomalies reported by customers and employees. The technological infrastructure used for these experiments was far more advanced than anyone had anticipated. The Salem mirror distortions weren't supernatural phenomena, but the outcomes of experimental, the synchronized customers in Bakersfield were not experiencing a collective mental health episode. The Roswell security footage demonstrating impossible simultaneous appearances was documentation of holographic projection tests intended to assess how people react to experiences that challenge their understanding of physical reality, not evidence of paranormal activity. Augmented reality overlays are used to study psychological responses to reality distortion. Even the Point Pleasant disappearance, which appeared to be an urban legend, turned out to be a carefully staged event intended to study information propagation and myth creation in small communities. Catherine Mills was a real person, but her disappearance was a controlled extraction carried out to test how quickly and accurately information about unusual events would spread through local social media. However, were actors hired to test crowd influence techniques and employee response to mass unusual behavior? Roswell, New Mexico was chosen for reality distortion tests because of its UFO history, while Salem, Massachusetts was chosen for the mirror experiments because of the town's historical association with supernatural phenomena, which makes residents more likely to accept paranormal explanations for unusual experiences. The document describes the extensive psychological profiling that went into choosing store locations for various types of experiments. The program was so compartmentalized that most participants thought they were working on separate legitimate research projects focused on customer experience optimization, loss prevention, or operational efficiency. Only a small group of senior executives and project directors fully understood the program's true scope. Folklore and the population were already predisposed to believe in extraordinary phenomena. Project Nexus involved hundreds of researchers, technicians, and field operatives across multiple departments within Walmart's corporate structure and purpose. Project Nexus's ultimate objective went well beyond retail optimization, according to the leaked materials, which showed that the research was intended to create methods for widespread behavioral change that could be used in social control programs, public health campaigns, and political campaigns. Walmart's vast network of stores, a combination of Walmart's internal research budget, government grants, and payments from private technology companies looking to develop and test behavioral modification technologies, provided an ideal laboratory for testing these techniques on diverse populations without detection or consent. The financial investment in Project Nexus was staggering, with the document revealing expenditures exceeding to $0.3 billion over 7 years. The psychological impact on unintentional experimental subjects was well documented, but project leadership purposefully ignored it. The return on investment was measured not only in terms of increased sales and operational efficiency, but also in terms of the value of behavioral data and manipulation techniques that could be licensed to other organizations. Many people who received Project Nexus interventions experienced persistent anxiety, paranoia, and difficulty trusting their own perceptions, according to follow-up studies. The document contains transcripts of internal meetings where ethics concerns were raised and systematically dismissed. Risk assessment teams weighed the potential costs of exposure against the benefits of ongoing research, and legal departments attempted to ensure that all activities remained within technical compliance of federal regulations while violating the spirit of informed consent and human subjects protection. A number of subjects needed psychological treatment for trauma-related symptoms, while others reported long-term changes in their behavior and decision-making patterns. The most disturbing of all is that the leaked materials show that Project Nexus was not a finished program, but rather an ongoing operation that has spread to include online retail platforms, mobile applications, and smart home devices. The methods created and tested in physical stores are now being implemented across Walmart's entire digital ecosystem, impacting millions of customers who are unaware that their online shopping experiences are being manipulated for research purposes. The program should continue with improved security measures. For those of us who have been following, Walmart's official response has been to deny the authenticity of the leaked materials while launching an internal investigation to identify the source of the leak. The leak has sparked congressional investigations, class action lawsuits, and international scrutiny of American corporate research practices. Walmart's stock price fell by 23% in the days following the document's publication, and several senior executives resigned amid the growing scandal. The Project Nexus revelation answers questions we didn't even realize we should be asking about these odd occurrences over the years, explaining the intricate coordination of seemingly random events, the participation of people with specialized knowledge, and the recurring trends in business responses that gave confidentiality precedence over openness. However, it also brings up fresh and more troubling issues regarding the definitions of human dignity, privacy, and consent. In a time of behavioral manipulation and corporate spying, if a large store is able to carry out in-depth psychological tests on millions of uninformed consumers without what more organizations might be involved in similar actions after 7 years of detection, how many of our everyday encounters are influenced by invisible or incomprehensible forces? The Project Nexus controversy marks a turning point in the interaction between businesses and customers, demonstrating the potential inherent errors in our most basic beliefs about business dealings. Every moment spent in a retail setting, every customer care encounter, and every shopping excursion could be a component of someone's experiment, producing information that will be utilized to affect our behavior going forward in ways we are unable to forecast or manage. As inquiries proceed and further as details come to light, one thing is evident. Our bizarre tales this evening have never truly been about singular occurrences or unsolved riddles. They provided insights into a huge, covert system of manipulation and control that functions in the most ordinary facets of our everyday existence. Not the actual terror is in the unnatural or inexplicable. The persistent infringement of human agency that has been concealed in blatantly obvious masquerading as a Walmart shopping excursion,